Good morning. Welcome to another MSP Community Live. How you doing, Josh?
I'd say I'm doing fantastic. I could be doing better because it's like we've been teased by spring and some nice weather, but then this last
Mm,
week has been absolute awful weather. So I'm watching this morning while I was working on the background. I had a match play with John Daly and his son against Phil Mickelson and a YouTube golfer. And I'm just watching them, play golf and talk trash back and forth, and then behind me the window's open and it's just like raining in 37, and it's like, man, I just
mm,
want to be out there doing that. So I need have going a little stir crazy here this week. I want to get out of the
mm.
house and do stuff. So that's where I'm at. How about yourself?
Yeah, same kind of deal here. We have the spring teas. It's kind of nice today, but again, it's going to be back to bad weather before I know it. But it's baseball season. It is Mets home opener today. They're 3-3, so I'm excited about that. It's my favorite sport, favorite time of year. Nightly games going on, and so far they're doing okay. Right, they went 3-3 on a road trip, and I'll take it. Obviously, the talk of baseball is the Yankees and the torpedo bat issue at the moment. Um, I'm just excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, I apparently picked the right year to adopt the Padres because that's where my MSP is based out of. So they basically said
They're
if you're
looking
gonna
good.
follow it, you have to do the Padres. I'm like, all right, cool. And yeah, we haven't lost a game yet. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that's normal for this team because I don't follow baseball
No,
until the playoffs. But I'll take it.
they're a good team. They're not this good usually.
Well,
Okay,
there's
but before I turn this
162 games or something, 172. There's plenty of games to go.
162, before we turn this into the sports show accidentally, we have two guests this week with us. Tim Coach from Synomi and Chris Johnson from GTIA. How's it going, guys?
But we're both waiting to go. It's going good, thanks. I'm kind of in the same boat as
You're
Josh.
right.
Like I'm tired of being teased. I want the warm weather. It's a bit cold and rainy today, but I do leave for Palm Springs on Sunday, so I'm not too disappointed in there.
Jealous. Nice.
And I couldn't tell you anything other than I like the Reds. I mean, I playoffs, that's about it for me. So yeah, I'm in the boat with Josh on this weather thing. Like it would be really nice if it would just make up its mind.
Agreed.
Yes.
You guys want to give
Agreed.
a quick introduction to the community? I think CJ has been on before, but just kind of a quick introduction, real quick. It's your first time in a while being on here, or Tim, your first time.
Yeah, first time, right? So thanks for having me on. So basically, Tim Coach, I am the chief evangelist for a company called Sonomi. Basically, what happened is I spent, I don't know, 20 years, a couple of decades rebuilding MSPs, running MSPs, consulting with MSPs. And then I got tired of the random 3, 4 a.m. phone calls because my staff wouldn't answer their phone when something was down. Jumped over to the dark side. And have been in this space for a couple of years, representing a few companies that I think really does some great stuff and tools that I myself would have used at my MSP. So now it's just like, right, like I when somebody told me about this job, I was like, that's a thing. Like you get to travel around and talk to MSPs and like do all this great work and just help people out. Like you can actually do that. And they were like, yeah. And I'm like, where do I press and what copy's mine? I refer to myself as a recovering MSP because I don't want to go back.
I would say the same thing. I'll probably will always be a recovering MSP. I joke. The world we live in today, from an MSP standpoint, man, there are tools for just about anything you can think of. 10
Mm,
years ago, it's like, I have
mm-hmm.
tools. Sometimes they work. So today, I have the privilege of working for GTIA, and the opportunities within that are really around cybersecurity education for the MSP community, raising that bar, helping MSPs recognize that if you can't get your house in order, I'm not sure what else you might have in order. I guess that would probably sum it up.
Well, Appreciate you
Awesome.
guys being on here and sharing your expertise.
That recovering MSP.
All right, well, let's get ahead and get into the stories here. So our first one coming up, Entra ID P2 should come with Business Premium and Microsoft E3. This is an event. It'll do nothing to change Microsoft's mind, I'm aware. I mean, maybe it will. Maybe they're watching. But the really the gist of this is locking what could be considered critical security functions behind a paywall. We've seen the SSO tax. There's actually a website about that SSO tax. And I mean, I don't know about you guys here, but me being non-recovering MSP, I'm current MSP. We get a lot of business email compromises to deal with, and just being in the industry in general and talking with other peers, it is one of the more common, if not the most common thing of compromise. And it feels like, I mean, if you have IDP2, there are other things that you can do with risk-based conditional access and things that could stop that. So do you feel that we could eliminate these if we stop the gatekeeping of critical security features behind paywalls? What are your guys' thoughts on this?
Ooh, let's hear from our guests first.
Yeah. Okay. So this is where I tend to be a bit different than kind of like the normal gearhead, right? So my education and trade is engineering. I will say this all day long. I was a really above average admin, but I didn't forklift anything, right? Like I depended on the really smart people to do that kind of stuff. But I think when you're talking about this, it becomes more basic. Like it's, I think Matt and I was talking about earlier, I was on with Wayne earlier, and we were talking about how you just got to get to basic business practices. Like this is like, we're talking about levers here. And we're having a real hard conversation on just the business front side of it about how do you do security first? Because a lot of the business people, right, aren't going to understand what that talks about, right? So how do we take those words and Josh, what you're asking, and transition that into a business conversation so that the people that are really kind of sitting at the helm with the power of the pen can understand in their words what that means and how they can start even earlier than that in the process to make it something that's just adapted either early on or not necessarily adapt because it's already there.
Yeah, I don't know that my opinion is that different. This is the thing I would say, and we see this all the time. Largely, MSPs will come to me and say, but I can't afford to pay for another tool because my clients aren't going to pay for that increase. And I think it comes back to some of these things from that security by default, secure by design, going, the SSO tax and some of those things. It's like, but shouldn't this kind of be part of how we work with our clients to make sure they understand that costs can go up in order to make you more secure? I mean, yes, I would love it if Microsoft would just start giving some of this stuff away. And for that matter, any other vendor, especially for the MSP, right? Like, come on, I'm going to put your products and services into my client's environment. Why can't I at least get the products for myself at no cost? And wouldn't that just be a perfect world for all of us?
Yeah, it'd be perfect.
Fantastic.
My opinion on this has changed, right? Like when I was MSPing, yeah, it was sure I'd want everything included. But you also have to, like, Microsoft is in this to make money too, right? Like they can't give away everything for free. And yes, I share the SSO tax and the belief that, right, that should be part of a security suite, but you can't give everything away, and there has to be some features that get charged for. So I don't necessarily fault Microsoft for making a higher security version of something. There could be some debate as to what's included in it or not, but they're a business too, and I think it's sometimes easy for us to forget that. The same way that our clients, right? If I still think MSP style, probably wish everything we told them to buy was included.
Well, I think the other thing too, going back to Tim's point, is how your engineering are doing it. There's what the common expression. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Not that I are looking to
Don't
do
you have
that,
a cat,
but
Josh?
I have 2 cats. I love cats. I would never do that, but the thing with it, like, there's other things to do besides, hey, if your client isn't willing to pay for a license or pay for the project, like looking at like, okay, well, what other ways that we can mitigate the risk, right? Maybe it isn't another license or this. It's like, hey, well, given your current infrastructure, here's what we can do. Whether it's modifying a conditional access policy or something along the lines of figuring out other things that we're able to do to accomplish. Hey, whenever we do have like security incidences and we're going through the CAPA, it's, hey, this happened. Here's what we can do to prevent it. Here's ABC. It's like, hey, advanced security tool obviously has a cost, but look what we just went through. I mean, we're preventing, the whole overhead. And again, putting it in business speak, because we're not telling them which levers that we're pulling. We're not really telling them, which license from the technical aspect it is, investment, return on investment, things like that. So looking at like, part of me is like, yeah, it should come with these, because if it's part of another SKU or these things are included, we can eliminate the amount of business email compromises. But understand, like to Matt's point, like, yeah, dude, I mean, at some point you're going to have to pay for a license or pay for some of these things. And I guess if you know what you're doing, there's other ways kind of around preventing those business email compromises, or when you get into like the security architecture or having those sort of conversations around the business risk and, trying to find, hey, what are we trying to eliminate and what can we do to do that? There's one of the conversations that we hear quite a bit is, hey, our clients aren't going to pay for this, or they don't have the budget for security. There's so much things that you can do with security that don't involve an advanced license or things like that. I mean, working on policies and procedures, for example, or just looking internally and designating a security officer, kind of building that security culture and security awareness training. I mean, that takes labor. It's not a fancy tool or anything like that, but there are things that you can do to increase your security that doesn't involve, the new shiny tool or the pulling this lever.
And I think to add to that, and I would say though, like and I know this is going to sound bad, right? Like there's just no way around it, but there's no better opportunity than a good disaster, right? I mean, this is you go to them and you say, look, here's it's the same. Here's the Yugo, here's the Buick, and here's the Cadillac. Which one you want? Well, I want the Yugo. Okay, well here's your contract. Here's what's covered in the contract for you to get the Yugo, right? But just so you know, here's some open areas that the Buick and the Caddy would cover. And then, we're going to go with Yugo, right? We're very price conscious. Okay, well, we can certainly do that. Just so you know, here's the risk. And then a lot of people forget that they need to be continually having those conversations in that risk assessment, right? So like I hate a QBR. I freaking hate a QBR. I think they're not done right. They're not of real value because we've turned them into, let me just regurgitate all the reports I've sent you. Right. But
or
when
selling.
you are doing, or selling, right. But when you're doing that QBR, but part of that QBR is, here's the risk that we need to continue to talk about because of what you've done. Right. So you're doing a couple things. One, you're making them aware that they still have risk that is not being managed. And then 2, when something does happen, you can go back to them and say, look, here's X, Y, and Z. This is why it happened. We kind of predicted it. This is where it was at in your risk plan. And, this, right, if we've gone with the Buick or maybe we just went with a Chevy before the Buick, right, it would have stopped that. Right. So now that's the opportunity for where you go in and say, okay, this is how you educate them. And unfortunately, as we all know, right, you don't touch the stove after you touch the stove, right? Disasters create pain, which creates learning processes, unfortunately. But that's also part of our job on the business side is, how many people are actually doing risk management or showing that risk in their reviews, right? A lot of people are probably still not doing that, where they go in and say, this is what your contract covers. This is what it doesn't cover. Here's your exposure to risk in this process. And I think that's what we're talking about, right? If you're super high end, then IDP2 is probably something that needs to be a relevant conversation. It may need to be a relevant conversation just if you're not high end, but depending on what you work with, right? But it's continual education that we have to do, and then the risk mitigation and management or projected risk mitigation and management that we have to do to really help the business person, right? Because that's who we work with, and then the tech people are our advocates to put that kind of stuff in place.
Well, you keep saying the bad word, the 4-letter word risk is not a common vocabulary word used by many MSPs. They do not like talking about risk.
Sure they do. They just go down their line card and say, you don't have these things, right? That's where
not
the risk comes from.
Yeah.
See, man, that's such a key. That is where we land on our failures and relationships with our clients, right? It's the same thing as having when I'm consulting with an MSP and they're like, oh, I've got contract renewals coming up. And they're like, oh, I just really hate, why do you hate that? You should know. So I'm a child of Sandler sales training, right? That's what I did when I was in my MSP days. And in that training, you're always pushing to the no. So that any point in the process, and you can predict where that client's going to say no, and you can have that ready. It's the same thing when you're going into contract renegotiations, right? If you're going into a renegotiation of a contract and you're worried that you're going to lose that contract, then you do not have the relationship with that client you should have. And that's the same thing as risk. If you're not having those conversations and making it a comfortable standard every time you meet or quarterly or whatever, the big yearly business planning, and those are relationships where you become a critical part of the business and the leadership team for those companies. It's not the QBR. It's helping them understand where the risks are. It's you understanding as a business where your relationship is, where it sets, right? I always used to tell people as well, if I'm going to fire you, you know it's coming. There's no surprises. And I think it's the same thing, relationship-based, risk-based, contract renewals. If you don't know where they set, then that's a you issue, not a them issue.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that was a great opening topic. A lot of really good information there. So let's go ahead and move on to our next one here. Matt, you rocking the laptop today? You want to read this, or you want me to take over for you?
You go ahead. You're doing great, Josh.
All right. Sounds good. In our first news story here, nearly 24,000 IPs behind wave of Palo Alto Global Protect scans. Researchers have detected a surge in scanning activity targeting Palo Alto Network's Global Protect login portals, potentially signaling a forthcoming attack or vulnerability exploitation. Grano has reported over 24,000 unique IPs involved, with 23,800 deemed suspicious and 154 confirmed as malicious. The scans peaked on March 17th, 2025 and remained high through March 26th. Most originated from the United States and Canada, primarily targeting US-based systems. Similar spikes in the past preceded vulnerability disclosures within weeks. Admins are urged to review logs, strengthen defenses, and block malicious IPs. Palo Alto Networks is investigating the activity and advises users to keep Pan OS updated. So, is this scary, or is this just one of the many threats that we have to continually monitor and protect against?
Yeah, I'm just going to say something controversial. It sounds a little like just keep your stuff up to date, right? Your stuff's going to get scanned constantly 24/7 anyway. And I guess it's good to know about, but one, if you just have Palo for a firewall and not using it for remote access or anything, don't make the login, accessible from the internet in the first place. And two, whether you do or don't read about this, still keep your stuff up to date.
I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing new here, right? If you got a big name, Palo Alto, ConnectWise, ThreatLocker, Cisco, if you got a big name and you got access to a lot of systems, you're consistently getting attacked. And that's just that, we all know that. And Matt hit the nail on the head, right? Doing the right thing means you're doing it when nobody's looking. Keep your crap up to date.
Perfect. Well, easy. But let's go over to a topic that's not so easy. CJ, this is all you. Working in IT is stressful. Why? We regularly post around here about working in IT being stressful. Why do you think that is? Why is burnout running rampant in our industry? How is it impacting you professionally and personally outside the office? If you could advocate for and drive one or two changes to make IT less stressful, what would those be? All right, kicks off, CJ.
There's no good answer for this. I think this kind of goes back to the headlines, right? When you see the CISO in the crosshairs and getting blamed for fill in the blank, no one wants to really be a CISO anymore. And I think the same is true in the IT space, right? Like we've been talking about, the prices for products and services, and no matter what you do, the IT guy still gets blamed when something bad happens. Well, you should have told me, you should have warned me. And it's like, well, those were those QBRs, those were the things that we brought up on contract renewals. They're like, I want the Yugo, right? And I think that internal IT is even more stressful because, and oftentimes, it's looked at through the lens of like, we might use third-party MSP on the outside, but the person that's on the inside, and I remember too vividly when I worked as an internal IT person in the construction management space, and after I had left the company, I had been gone for more than 5 years. They got popped. I was the first person they called. Do you know how stressful it is? And I didn't even work there anymore. Like, I felt like I was in trouble and I didn't have any engagement with that company for 5 years. So I think it's the blame game is very popular. The language or the conversations around what we do in IT often doesn't translate well to those that are needing those IT services. And I think the thing that I would see being really helpful is that we've got to raise the bar on the awareness around why burnout is happening. It can't just be, well, you see the headlines and we just got to stop blaming people. No, we've got to start helping people so that they are prepared when those types of things happen. So it's not bearing the burden by themselves. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with why organizations like CyberRise exist, is that well-being part of this is you got to talk to other people. This is not a live in the basement. It reminds me of the IT Crowd episode when the goth guy comes out of the server room. They're like, what, you still work here? Yeah.
Yep. Well, I think too, the amount of things that are impacted. I mean, trying to do like a metaphor, like if you're doing physical security, IT is one of those things that like it's hard to, or cybersecurity especially too, is like it's hard to tangibly touch it. Right? Physical, like cool, I could see the door and I could put fences and barricades and like that's my viewpoint and put cameras around it. But not only could you talk in IT, like all right, you've got this door protected, but now this door just like came out of nowhere and now there's attackers like coming in through this door you didn't even know existed or just appeared out of thin air, and that could happen anytime, anywhere, and like constantly being vigilant, and all of these doors are popping out of nowhere and 24/7 and all of this stuff. And you're not only do you have to protect against the doors you can see, the doors you can't see, but there's also projects and there's just so much stuff going on and prioritizing and 24/7 and go. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot that needs to be handled and
It's
juggled
not
at
8 to
once.
5.
No, it's like look, it starts off with a maturity thing, right? And then it moves into it. So back when I first started in doing this, it was like the MSPs would just grind their techs into the dirt, right? And we've seen a lot of churn in employee status. And then things started to get better, and we don't quite do that anymore. But look, when we're at the basis of it, especially if you're an MSP or someone like, like a Matt, right? It's, you're taking care of all of these smaller companies. And without the companies that we represent, right? Like if something goes wrong with us, there is a mass outage on every level. That creates high stress. That creates the IT place. And then when you look at look, it's, you go into a pediatrician office and their computers go down and they got 20 rooms full of babies that can't get prescriptions, that can't be diagnosed, that can't get their logs done. Like that is a very stressful environment. So the fact that we literally take care of the backbone of all business is stressful on itself. Now, there's things that you can do, right? Like maturity, right? Matt or Josh were talking earlier about SOPs, right? Where are your SOPs? Where are you writing predictive SOPs, right? And then you got to look at your tool stack, right? How many of us actually evaluate our tool stack on a yearly basis to make sure we're getting the best bang out of your buck? Because there's things that you can do to create efficiency, right? To create the working person's job. Because let's face it, that the worst job in the world is help desk. Like you couldn't pay me to do help desk nowadays because they're literally first and foremost they're psychologists, right? Because they have to listen to the phone when it blows up, and then they got to try to figure out what's going on afterwards. But it's like we just create this. By nature, it's a stressful environment, so we have to look at it from a standpoint of how do we get it to be at least stressful, and that's creating that's growing maturity. It's creating SOPs. It's creating workbooks on how you process things. It's creating SLAs. Then it's looking at your tool stack and say, if everybody hates this tool, why aren't we finding a better tool and getting rid of this tool? Or why aren't we shrinking our tools to do a better job managing them than just having these giant? Because like back in the day, I had both sides of Altiris. Do you know what a monster that was to manage both sides of that? Because people think, oh, here's this one side that's nice and pretty. Yeah, it was. But then there was this whole monster back end that if you didn't have super intelligent people back there doing something, and if they flicked a lever in the wrong direction, you got 10,000 tickets instantaneously. So I think it's just the idea of how do you create more maturity in your processes and procedures, and then how do you create more maturity in your tool set to make the technical people's lives actually easier, right? Because that's something I think we forget. I think when you're immature, you're just constantly throwing people at a process issue, right? Like stop doing that. Grow your efficiency through your people by actually making their life better, and your clients' lives will be better. It's amazing how that works.
One contention against the help desk is I've been out of the restaurant for about 5 years and I still hear the kitchen ticket printer sometimes when I'm trying to sleep. So
I do have one more point on this though, and that is I think we sometimes in this industry in particular get some blinders on. Right, Tim, you talked about healthcare. Josh, you were in the restaurant industry. Those are just as stressful industries as what we do, right? It's not any worse here. Like, it's April 4th. Go talk to your accountants and tell me how they're feeling right now. It's because we're so like kind of isolated in our tech world. I think we sometimes think that we're the only industry that's like really stressed or we have it worse than anyone else. It's kind of just there's stress everywhere, and you guys talked about some ways to reduce it, but I think it's a good reminder sometimes to think about what your clients' offices are like. We don't necessarily have it any worse than anyone else.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you just like where there has to be some evaluation too, or you just got to evaluate where your stress is coming from, and then proactively say, okay, how do we mitigate the stress, or how do we reduce it, and what is it going to take to do that? And then, I was talking to a guy the other day, and he's like, well, I'm on a budget freeze right now. Okay, well, that means multiple things if you know how to listen. It means you're not going to spend more money, but what it doesn't mean is you're not going to spend the money you're already spending more efficiently, right? And I think that's the thing is efficiency and maturity are two ways. And when you talk about it as you're growing MSP, if you want to break that $1 million ceiling and the $3 million ceiling, the only way to do that is through efficiencies and proactively doing it, which means you've got to get yourself out of the mud to actually be proactive.
Yep. I think the other side too is just, like Matt brought out, everyone's going through stress. Like it's not easy anywhere. So, be a good person, have some empathy, and have that understanding, whether you're on help desk or anything. That was actually one of the things that way back in my call center days when I was teaching classes, like your call center is help desk, but even worse, because typically you're using end user support, like end user versus business user. So like residential. And not only that, like you're just a figure on the other end of the call. So a lot of the times you get verbally beat up and abused, but even just taking that, it's like, hey, this person could have just like worked this really long shift and just had like the worst day. They hit every red light on the way home. Like they went to get coffee, their coffee shop was closed and all this, and they come home and their internet doesn't work. And it's like, this is the worst thing. And it like all of that other stuff was stressful. And this is the thing that tipped him over. And now you're the unfortunate person who has to take the call and receive all the brunt of it. And I get it.
Yep.
And it sucks. And they shouldn't be mean to you, but having that understanding of like, hey, like this person just wants to like relax and check their email. Like, let's help them the best that we can and have that empathy and understanding. Because yeah, it sucks out there.
It does.
Yeah,
And it's everywhere, right? I mean, Matt's totally right. It's everywhere. It's every industry. There's something going on, right? If if you're in the concrete industry and you're having a bad day, guess what? A house isn't getting built. A road isn't getting done. You're behind, and a lot of these contracts come with penalties when you're not on contract. It's everywhere. It's really learning how to mitigate it and how to look at it in a way that's constructive versus just automatically feeding off the negativity.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, I think that's a great way to end that one. So let's go ahead and go to our next story here. And this is one from the sysadmin subreddit. Do security people not have technical skills? The more I've been interviewing people for cybersecurity role at our company, the more it seems that many of them just look at logs or something else. They look automated, or they just know how to use the tool and they're not applying any critical thinking. And they just delegate, hey, our compliance policy says this, do this, or hey, can you check this out? Is this a trend? I mean, do you think that security people don't have technical skills? Do you think this is okay? What are your guys' thoughts on this particular topic?
Two questions there. Do they not have technical skills, and is it okay that they don't? A lot of the better security people I've worked with have had some infra experience, but I think that forgets, or when we see this as a criticism, there's a whole lot of administrative side to security, right? The whole governance side, right? Risk management is not necessarily an infra technical thing. It helps, but I think this goes back to a common complaint or common issue of seeing security as just like the guy in his basement with the hoodie, like trying to break into stuff. And there's a lot more aspects to security than just that technical aspect of trying to stop the threat actor from coming in. So I guess my position on this is, yes, I see security people without technical skills, but some of the best assets in your security world are like risk professionals. And yeah, they might have some background in technical from way back when, but a lot of them are really more managerial and administrative type training. And you need that too. And I think this thread and this conversation is a good reminder for us to take those tech-only blinders off when it comes to security.
Yeah, I'm on a couple of different places on this one. I mean, like the first thing I would say is this individual, apparently they are technical, right? I think we can tell that. The second one, I would ask them, I would want to see what their job posting looks like, right? Because I think if they're to the point that they're frustrated enough to throw it out on our beloved Reddit, then the question is, did your job description fit what you're specifically looking for? Because it's, when you look at security, I look at it from a couple different aspects. There's certainly the technical people that flip the levers, monitor the logs, are actively being engaged in security every day and every step of what they're doing. And then you have, your VCSOs. VCSOs are not actively technical people. They understand the logs, they understand the management, they understand the frameworks, right? And I compare that a lot of times to, teams, right? We were talking about baseball earlier. It's how many coaches weren't really that great of players, You know, sometimes you need a really good general that can actually get out there and hit the ball, right? Maybe they, you know, it's a big thing. You don't see a lot of people wearing glasses in baseball, right? It's because there's a depth perception. It does create a little bit of an offset when they're trying to hit the ball, but that doesn't mean they're not a great strategist. So my thing here is, I think where that particular post is probably missing the mark is in their description of what they were looking for versus the breadth of various avenues in the security industry.
I think the other thing, though, to think about is an entry-level security position is not an entry-level IT position. I think in order to be effective, you do have to, and again, to your point exactly, it depends on what the job posting it is. But I think like your SOC analyst or things like that. I mean, there's been a rise the last couple of years of degrees or boot camps or, hey, take this class, they get the certification and make six figures. Well, that's not really the case. There's been plenty. I mean, I know I've said on this show before, taking an example of one of my good friends who hires for security at a bank or doing the interns, is he'll hire people that are fresh out of a 4-year degree in cybersecurity on a college, but they don't know basic things like how Active Directory works or like basic networking and things, because they're just not part of the curriculum and they don't have that hands-on experience. So I think there is a little part of it, but depending on the role, it might not be a technical, role. Like I said before too, like running a restaurant has more parallels with cybersecurity than level 1 help desk stuff does for me. So it really does depend on the position, because security too is like one of those where it's such broad. Like, well, what do you mean? Are you talking an analysis, a pen tester, a threat hunter, somebody that's in charge of your SIM or your SOC, or are you talking about the vCISO role? Are you talking about a GRC role, which is kind of I would put that under the cyber umbrella, and some of those don't require technical expertise. And I think there will always kind of be that sysadmin versus the network, or sysadmin versus the security, right? It's like, hey, there's an issue, and then you go to the network team. Nope, it pings. It's not us. Like, bring it back. Or just seeing the security kind of blindly like punt things over the fence. And you really break that down with communication and building that culture. And instead of being the IT guy who hides in the server room, kind of just learning your team and knowing their strengths and weaknesses and who can do what and what needs to be done, and having the clear delegated roles.
Well,
so 2 things to add before we move on.
Yeah, we're just seeing a lot of like analysts coming out of the school sets now, right? We're seeing a lot of analysts, not a lot of, old security people started out on the help desk, working their way into tier 2 position, tier 3 position. And then it's like, oh, we should actually worry about this security thing. And I really like it. So maybe I need to move there. So they have all this technical background, right? But the analysts that we're putting out now, we're teaching them how to read logs and how to look for things and how to disseminate data. We don't teach them. Here's, I used to do this. Where's the truth of data coming from, right? We don't teach them where that is. We don't teach them. They're looking at, and I'm not talking bad about anybody. So we're not teaching them, the difference between an RMM platform that actually sucks the data in and a repository like IT Glue. Like, they don't understand the differences, right? Because we're teaching them what to look for, not where to look for it.
Yep. Well, the other thing I would add to that too is, like, from the technical side, just because you're super technical, like you can pull those levers, doesn't mean you'll fully understand how that translates to business risk and how it affects the business. Is you get like hey, that this came in, like, is it a false positive, or this CVE? Hey, this is a level 9, 9.7 CVE. We need to patch it now. But like looking at, okay, well, how does that operate the business as like a critical production thing where we might need to schedule downtime or have change control or come up with mitigating factors on things like that. So it's really one of those, like, so I like security, is that you can take a lot of the experiences of tech, of business, and you really have to kind of apply them to be effective at a higher level.
A couple of points here. One, thank you, Tim, for saying what I was trying to say in a much more coherent way. So that was awesome. But I think on the technical side, I think sometimes we get fooled or get kind of stuck in the idea of how small some of these orgs are, right? And the idea of the security generalist. So think about if you're a big security organization, right? You might be an analyst whose primary job is analyzing executables. Do I care if the person who analyzes malware knows how to configure a firewall? Nope. Not the slightest little bit, right? And yes, having some infra experience helps, but there are so many roles in here that don't have anything to do with what we think as technical, right? Technical is not just sysadmin. Technical might be coding. Technical might be knowing deep into networking, right? And in the broader security picture, there's a lot of hyper specialization out there, and you don't necessarily had to have had experience being a sysadmin or being a network admin to be successful and doing deeply technical things, right? Like I know how to open and do some basic executable analysis. I am not a malware analyst, right? That's a hyper specialized thing, and I think sometimes forget like just how focused some of these roles are. So they don't. I'm sticking to my current position. It's nice if they have some infra experience. I don't think it's a prerequisite.
Yeah, I think it's like, and I want to ramp that up. Just take it to a bit, right? So we're all used to like reading job descriptions or writing job descriptions and reading resumes. But here's the challenge that I would put out there. When you're writing that, or you're like, because what you don't want to waste anybody's time. You don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste the candidate's time. But when you're writing that, what you should be writing that for is, what does success look like in this role, whatever that role is, in your head? What does that successfully look like? Because guess what? You may actually have someone that's a gazillion times smarter than you in the technical world come in and say, okay, well, you're kind of combining a couple positions and you're not really, like, it's a bit messy, right? Like, how do we determine, right? And that's where you get good consultants and reach out to people like, obviously, you guys saying, okay, this is like, I'm trying to find this role. Okay, great. What does success look like in that role? And then define that out. And typically that's where your job description lies, right? So we spend too much time worried about, can you resolve, Word 97 issues, right? And not enough time about what if someone fills this position, what does that look like successfully from the person hiring them, right? Because a lot of times you're looking for rudimentary information or knowledge that's rudimentary to you, right? And you see this a lot with higher end people and kind of mid-tier people. The higher end people just automatically expect that mid-tier to know all 10 steps to get to the next spot, and they don't. So they probably know the third step and the seventh step, but you've got to take them along that way, and you got to help them understand what being successful in that position or in that task looks like.
Yep. All right. Well, with 10 minutes left, we got 2 stories to cover quick, so we'll go through these here. Next one is
or maybe just one, story, depending on how long we take.
Well, this one's just a news story, so we'll see what kind of discussion that we can get through this. But Oracle Health breach compromises patient data at U.S. hospitals. Oracle Health suffered a data breach affecting multiple U.S. hospitals, exposing patient data stored on legacy center servers. The breach occurred after a threat actor used compromised customer credentials to access the servers between January 22nd and February 20th, 2025. The stolen data may include electronic health records, and hospitals are now responsible for determining HIPAA notification requirements. A threat actor named Andrew is extorting the affected hospitals, demanding cryptocurrency payments. Customers have expressed frustration with Oracle's lack of transparency, as official communications have been informal, with no written reports or formal breach acknowledgement. So I don't know if this is one that you guys have been following, but for a while, Oracle was denying this sort of thing. Is this one that you guys have been following, or anything you'd want to add to the story on this?
So I saw this and was kind of loosely following it, but anytime I see a story like this, kind of almost like the other news story, I filter it through the lens of, is this in any way actionable for me, either as an MSP or as a consumer, right? Maybe doctor I used had health data in there. And reading this, I don't know if there's anything that I would need to do or change differently. It doesn't seem like there's any steps I need to take or anything I can do right at the moment. Just kind of wait and see if my data gets out, or if Oracle notifies me that my data gets out, right, via their HIPAA obligations. And it's a little bit of a frustration with some of these, in that you see these almost sky is falling, right, the Chicken Little type stuff coming through. And reading this, I don't know that there's anything for me to do. Like, I guess it's good to be aware of it, but there's no next step that I can gather.
I would go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would counter that and use these news information as they come out to, like you said, put it through the lens of the filter, but almost running it as a mini tabletop. Like, hey, if this was my organization, if I was Oracle, like, how would this affect me? How would I handle it? And this runs back to, like, obviously there's client frustrations and things. So it's like, do you have a well-documented and crafted communication plan? So, like, is this how you would act as well if you were the one having this incident? Like, would you, be denying it or putting out PR statements? And if the answer is I have no idea, then we need to figure out what your communication plan would be. Contact your cyber insurance, figure out, hey, like, is this covered, and then what kind of coverage do I get? What is like a PR or reputational harm damage? What does that look like, and kind of what should our communications plans be? I think that would be the actionable step that I would take from this, is just like, what is our communication plan to prevent these frustrations? But to your point as well, Matt, like, there's a lot of wait and see with this too.
And there's hundreds of articles. I'm not going to read every article and do a tabletop from each one.
Yeah, like I'm two ways on this. One, I follow several different racing groups. I love sailboat racing for whatever reason. It's just insane to me they can do that. So when I don't see Oracle's name on one of those boats, I'll worry, right? Because they're not hurting for cash, or if it's not on the F1 car, right? Then okay, now we got an issue. But for the most part, like, maybe I'm just kind of odd here, but I just take it. So I'm also like my own history, kind of like I like to know my own history. So I have Ancestry and I have 23andMe, and their big breach there. I just go from the standpoint of all my crap is out there in the world. I just got to monitor the stuff that's important to me, right? My credit report, like if you want to know that, I got high blood pressure, I'd probably tell you that. You don't need my medical records. Right. You want to know, is there something, Tim got a shot for something when he lived in Korea. Oh, maybe Tim didn't. Maybe Tim didn't. But it's not going to affect me. Right. Like, it's obviously my financial stuff affects me. But I just go from the standpoint of it's all out there. How do I protect myself so that I can do the best things that I can do for my own life and my family and move myself forward? But as far as like medical records, security, social security number, I just shredded. So I'm getting ready to move. So I just shredded a bucket of paper, a lot of from the military. And I've literally got one. I won't show it on here, but there's about 150 people's social security numbers on this printout I have. And I had at least 50 of these pages. Right. So my assumption is it's just all out there anyways. I just need to protect myself to move forward with like what I need to get done. If the rest of the world wants to know, have at it. I'm a public person, so what can I really protect? And if you're running around in the mountains with the little aluminum cone on, they definitely have your stuff. I'm just saying. If you think I'm off grid, you're not off grid.
Yeah. Operate off of zero trust. Yeah. Perfect. All right. With the last one here, this one is more just for fun. Because it was April Fool's this week, we had to go cover one of these. So this person here, everyone has taken multiple trainings on the importance and acknowledging self-responsibility of keeping backups, storing your files on OneDrive and not on the actual folder. So he made a April Fool's script and wiped everyone's local documents on the login. And, assuming that people took the trainings, they should have been fine. But apparently these people lied. So is this an effective way to get security best practices across to your users?
I would assume that person no longer has a job, is what I would assume.
Right.
Hey, it's a live test of backups. I mean,
Well, I love the test, but we also all know the reality, right? There's still those machines that sit out there that aren't on the network, right? Because they're running some German software from 1985, and that's the only software that does the specific testing that whatever widget you're making needs, right? It's
Yep.
there certainly there should be, but that person, I would say, if they have a job, I'd be immensely surprised.
Also, the same thing as like storing your documents, like the backup is it's the recycle bin, or storing your emails and deleted items. Like, hey, that's where I store my archive of emails.
So it's obviously a joke post, but it's a good reminder that kind of stuff that I used to do it too. You know, setting somebody's wallpaper upside down or setting their language to like Swahili or something, right? You got to let that stuff go. Like it's just not professional or appropriate. And I say this as someone who used to do stuff like that, where sending pop-ups to people's machines in my office and that kind of thing. And at some point, it just doesn't make sense to do anymore. So if you're watching this, let that be something that could happen, right? Obviously, that was a April Fool's joke post, but that kind of thing I've seen happen. So take the opportunity for maybe that to be the time to stop with the pranking of office PCs.
Absolutely.
Well, I think the only place I've ever actually seen kind of that mindset work is 30 years ago. I internshiped at the Harley Davidson manufacturer here in Kansas City. And like we had a flat policy on, and this is old days, right? So we still had, well, it wasn't that old. We weren't using 5-inch floppies. We were actually using 3.5-inch hard disks, right? But the policy was, if you spent more than on the help desk, if you spent more than 20 minutes working on a machine, you just wiped the machine. So you would literally walk over to the machine with the disk because everything was on the network, right? You'd work on it for about 20 minutes. And if you just got to the point where it was going to take longer than that, you just popped in the disk that would go out to the network and reload the image. That's the only place I've ever seen that work because it was just such a normal thing of wiping a machine out there that, you know, people knew if you walked up to the desk, whatever's there may not be there when they come back. But I think Matt, you're hitting it right. I think we've kind of gone past the point where the practical jokes and look at me, haha, I'm so smart and I'm going to take over your computer and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Like it's just grow up, mature. Like we got to get past it. I mean, there's good office fun. Don't get me wrong, but you know, what's funny to you may not be funny to somebody else. And we talked a little bit about empathy earlier, and it's one of those things where grow up, get a little maturity. Doesn't mean you can't have fun, but when you're screwing with somebody else's stuff, that's where your fun ends because they're not having any fun with that.
Yep.
Agreed.
All right. Well, the last minute here, we'll go over some wrap ups and some plugs. So, one thing I want to plug, if you guys haven't checked out, is RejectionCon coming up in a couple weeks. This is put on by our friends over at Empath and quite a few other awesome people. All of you can get a ticket, and the proceeds all go to charity as well. This is going to be a fantastic virtual conference made from the people who had talks from conferences rejected. So definitely check that out. I'm excited for seeing this, and again, it all goes to a fantastic cause. Also in the MSP Media Network, don't forget to check out Tech Bar as well for a fun, just kind of a hangout session with some great people. Other than that, from my end, always definitely plug IR games. We just had our end of the month one last week, so please sign up for the end of April for our IR exercise. Matt, Tim, anything you guys want to plug?
IT Nation Secure coming up. Registration is open. You've seen a couple live streams from me and Sean. Have another one coming up next week about what's different at it this year. So hope to see you there.
Yeah, from my end, I just always push, be part of the community, right? Don't be an island to yourself, right? There's great communities out there that are in line with what you're trying to do that can help you, personal, business, whatever it is. Don't sit back in your chair in the dark, cave-like office that we used to all sit in. go find someone and be part of community and get yourself some help and take yourself to the next level, because everybody's out there in the end to help you and make us a better community.
It's perfect way to end it. Couldn't say it better. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for coming on. Thanks to CJ as well, who had to take off a little early, but definitely appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next Friday. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.